Hey, it's Gary Bernier and Stephen Semple from the Business Growth Guys. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit about exit strategy. We're probably going to do a whole series on selling your business and exit strategy because we've had a couple of customers come to us recently and say, hey, somebody wants to buy my business, or I'm thinking about selling my business. And in the past, I've sold a business, bought a business. Those are my direct experiences. I've also had a number of business owners very close to me buy and sell. And Steve has been Steve did some rough math on his fingers and ran out of fingers and toes of the number of businesses that he's seen bought and sold. And so we know about these common mistakes that the business owner tends to make and on selling their business. And this isn't what we do for a living. We actually, create marketing strategies and want to help people build very successful businesses, which we'll talk about one of the segments, how that increases the value of your business. But we just want to get this information out there to business owners so that they stop making these mistakes, because as you'll be able to tell from this session, Steve will get a little animated on some of this stuff because it pushes his buttons, and we just want to get this stuff out there to you business owners because we think it's super important for you to get this concept locked in, because let's face it, the biggest payday in a business owner should be the day they sell their business, the day they exit their business. They should get a big check, and many don't. And so we want to help people understand how to get there and what to do to make that happen. So Steve, when a business owner, so you're happily sitting in your business, you're working away, everything's hunky-dory, you've got your plan, you're executing your plan, everything. So you've got your normal, you're comfortable, you're normal, everything's cool, right? And then some guy shows up and says, hey, I want to buy your business. And you go, you want to buy my business? Cool. And you get kind of excited. Steve, talk me through what happens next. When you get that tap on the shoulder, what happens in the mind of the business owner at that point? When they get that tap on the shoulder and somebody wants to buy their business.
Well, it's a pretty exciting thing because let's face it, for all of us, that whole idea of building up this baby and somebody coming along and saying, hey, here, I want to buy the business. And inevitably, the first part of the conversations, there's not even any conversation around price. So you've got your vision in your head of the really big check, which may not be theirs, or even when you get to the stage of starting to preliminary talk about money, you're like, wow, you know what? I'm going to get this big check that is going to allow me to do the other things I want to do in life. And what immediately happens is you project forward to that place. You immediately go to that place of, wow, I've now got a bank account full of money and I don't have to work, and I'm going to be able to check out. This is the dream. And you start living that dream.
So if I heard you right, what you're saying is after your first initial meeting with this person, you start mentally cashing that check and seeing your bank account with a bunch of extra zeros behind it. You've bought the wife the shiny thing you've always wanted to buy her. You're planned out the vacation of a lifetime, and you're upgrading things around it. In other words, you're spending some of the money. You've got a plan for this money before anything's really even started to happen.
Right. And if it's not the first meeting, it's at the second meeting, it's at the third meeting. But the further you go down the path, the more you have emotionally sold the business. And every business owner that I talk to all go, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay engaged. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. And they all do. They all check out, because you know what the first thing they stop doing is? Any long-term planning. Well, I don't want to invest in that thing because that's kind of a long-term thing, and that's going to benefit the buyer not now, or the impact's not going to happen right away. So I'm going to stop doing all of those things. All long-term decision making stops.
So if I heard you correctly, once you sort of wrap your head around you're going to get the big check and that you're going to not have to come into work one day and you're going to be able to sell your baby, the next thing you do is a little bit of, I'm putting words in your mouth, there's a little bit of self-sabotage here. And so the self-sabotage that I do that really, I'm sure you'll point out to me, bites me in the ass, comes back to haunt me, is I stop executing on my business to make sure that I'm executing my current existing strategy, whatever that happens to be for the next year, next 5 years, however far out I've got a strategy built out in front of me. What you're saying is I start pulling back from that. My decision making gets a little bit flawed because I'm thinking more about cashing the check than I am about growing my own business.
Absolutely. And here's what ends up happening. And you said it right. It's self-sabotage, because here's what happens. You got a business. Let's say your business has been going through really nice growth. We get now talking about buying the business. And here's the other thing. Everybody underestimates. Buying a business is not frickin' buying a house. You don't sign it 60, 90 days later, close. It is, if you talk to anybody who has any knowledge in this, it's a year-long process at best. There's due diligence to be done. There's negotiation to happen. Here's what happens. During that year, you stop doing the long-term things. What now happens? Sales flatten out. So now when I was talking to you before, I was talking about buying a growing business. I'm now looking at going, well, wait a minute. Sales have flattened out. I'm not buying a growing business now. Is a growing business worth more than a stagnant business? Hell yes. So if I'm a smart buyer, and buyers are smart, they're going to immediately go, this business is not worth as much because sales have flattened.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you're going to go, well, here's the 5-year sales trend projected for, and I'm going to go, screw the freaking 5-year sales trend. Sales are flat. I've now got to try to turn this sinking ship around, is the way I'm going to be as a buyer.
So when we say self-sabotage, what we mean by killing off your growth strategy is when the buyer turns around to negotiate with you later on and re-establish the value for your business, he's going to be driving the number lower because the business isn't growing.
And it's worse than that. You know it's also not growing. So it's harder for you now to get into the whole scenario. If this buyer walks, what I've now got to do is get momentum going in this business and do all these long-term things that I've put off if this sucker walks. So it's not only will the buyer, not only if the buyer is smart, will the buyer reduce their price and should reduce their price, but it's harder for you now to let that buyer walk because you've mentally, emotionally checked out. You're going to have to recheck in and start doing those things that you've been putting off, which, let's face it, is hard.
Right. And what we know is in any negotiation, the power is in being able to walk away. And so what you just said is my ability to walk away and push my value up is gone because I'm looking at the amount of work I'd have to do to put the value back in my business. And that's a pile. And it's easier at that point to take a lower value check. So we just gave power to the buyer.
Yep. And here's the thing that's painful for me to say, because I've said it over and over and over again. And everybody said to me, that will never happen to me. That will never happen to me. My guy's a good guy. That'll never happen to me. And it's happened every freaking solitary time. In the 11th hour, on the Friday, when you are going down to pick up your check, they're going to say, the buyer's going to say, you know what? We've dropped the price 30% because we've uncovered this. So your $5 million check has now been trimmed by $1.5 million, and it's $3.5 million. Your $10 million check is now $8.5 million. It has happened every goddamn time. And you know what ends up happening? The sellers accept it because they're so out of it. They have so cashed the check. I mean, it's crazy because what they've all figured out, the buyers have all figured out, is that you can't walk. You'll accept that 30% less. Because you go, well, I was kind of hoping for 5 million, but 3.5 million is still pretty nice, right? Like, it happens over and over and over again. And all I'm saying to people is be prepared for that in your mind. Factor in that there's going to be a haircut, and either be ready to walk or be ready to accept. But don't think it's not going to happen.
So Steve's done a couple of things so far. One is he's referred to selling the business like selling a house. I'm going to do a segment on that. So make sure you watch that because that'll walk you through some of the aspects. We're also going to do another follow-up segment, which is the actual steps that take place in an acquisition. So Steve's highlighted a few. If you didn't make notes, go rewind this thing now, start making the notes on the steps that you go through, because as he's highlighted, this is a year to an 18-month process. And there are a number of steps. And the ones we're highlighting today are the ones where we see the business owner signing away, sometimes, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, depending on the size of their business, because they don't understand the steps involved and what's going to take place, and how they're mentally not playing the strongest game. Now, my question back to you, Steve, is have you ever seen anybody do it differently? Do you have an example of anybody playing this game differently that we could share with the people? And maybe we'll finish with that.
Actually, there is a fun one, and it's how Pepsi ended up buying Gatorade. So Coke approached Gatorade to buy Gatorade. And Gatorade at that time was run by a couple of university professors out of University of Florida. It was a pretty successful company. Coke looked at it and said, this would be awesome to plug into their distribution network. And so Coke went through the whole due diligence and everything else. Now Pepsi knew Coke was going to drop their price at the 11th hour. So what Pepsi did, no one knew what the price was, but Pepsi wanted it. So Pepsi called the lawyer who was representing the folks from Gatorade and said, if Coke drops their price at the last minute, you give us a telephone call, we'll give you what Coke was offering. 11th hour happens. Coke comes along and says, here's the haircut. The guys look at Coke and say, F off, pick up the phone and call Pepsi. Pepsi ends up owning Gatorade.
Right. So that's the one. That's a great story from the buyer's perspective, how to take advantage of the 11th hour. From the seller's perspective, and sort of what your theme was in terms of taking activities and growing up the business, I've heard you talk about one, and I think it's in the cable space. That's the one I was sort of fishing for.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So it was one of the early ones. It was one of the early ones sold by Ted Rogers. And I cannot remember whether it was Dallas or Houston, but it was down in Texas. And he was basically selling a cable company that he had. And the way that he negotiated the sale is he said, okay, we're going to base the price upon the number of subscribers, right? They said, yeah, we're going to base the price on the number of subscribers. Awesome. So while the negotiation was going on, what Rogers did was dramatically up to his sales and marketing effort, greatly increase the number of subscribers. So when the cable company that was buying came to them and said, well, we want to reduce the dollar per subscriber because we see this and this and this. He said, sure, fine, let's reduce the dollar per subscriber. And they said, okay, great. So that means we have to give you this size check. He was like, no. We've so much increased the number of subscribers. Here's the check you've got to give us. And he actually ended up selling the company for more than what it was being anticipated on. Because what did he do? Freaking continued to grow the thing. The other thing he knew is by continuing to grow it, he could get other suitors.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, those are two, for anybody that's listening, those are two great stories, examples, and we've got a ton more to share with you. The first one, the reason Gatorade was successful, there was more than one suitor. So if you didn't write that down, having more than one buyer is one of our 10 keys to success. You've got to have more than one buyer. And then, as Steve spent this whole episode talking about, you got to continue to grow your business, because that's how you have hand at the end of the sales cycle, that year, that 18 months later, where you can actually get the true value out of your business. You have to do the Ted Rogers thing. You have to keep working on it. You can't check out. You can't make this major mistake that we've been talking about all episode. Awesome, Steve. Those are some great stories. And, we've given the listeners a lot to think about here. So we'll wrap this one up, and guys, tune in and watch some of the other segments. Like we said, we got a ton to share with you in this area, and it's all just so you guys know what to expect and how to plan for exiting your business one day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.